Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to all those listening. Welcome to a review of the literature around iodine supplementation and pregnancy and the perinatal period. And first of all, what is the clinical relevance of this? Iodine is essential for the production of thyroid hormones, which in turn are important for normal growth and development. Severe iodine deficiency in pregnancy causes cretinism and irreversible brain damage in offspring. Also, we find that iodine is required for synthesis of thyroid hormones, which are in turn crucial for normal neuronal myelination, migration, and glial synthesis. And approximately 2 billion people in the world are at risk of iodine deficiency. Children and pregnant women are most vulnerable to the risks of iodine deficiency. Pregnant women, especially due to increased renal losses, increased placental delivery, and the need to supply the fetus with thyroxine up to the first 14 weeks of gestation. What search strategy did we use? First of all, we looked at the Cochrane Library. We found one out-of-date review, and then onto PubMed, using the search terms pregnancy iodine deficiency, then narrowed down the 3 latest systematic reviews. According to the National Health and Medical Council, systematic review is the first level of evidence. These reviews reviewed randomized control trials, which is the second level of evidence. Commenting on the quality of evidence that we found, all 3 systematic reviews were assessed by 2 independent reviewers with discrepancies resolved by a 3rd or 4th reviewer. While the level of evidence that was reviewed were randomized control trials or consisted of randomized control trials, all 3 groups of reviewers that covered these commented on the lack of high-powered and statistically relevant trials that were available. Reviewers also attempted to produce meta-analysis relating to iodine in pregnancy, but found that the data was too lacking for them to do so. Then continuing with the quality of evidence, let's look at the sources of bias. In the study Iodine Intake in Human Nutrition, the systematic literature review, they excluded studies before 2000. This was suggested to skew the grading of the evidence of outcome measurements. All studies relating to pregnancy complications and outcomes had extremely high dropout rates. It's also worth mentioning that the reviewers devised and used their own guide for conducting systematic literature reviews. Then in the study, Impact of Iodine Supplementation in Mild to Moderate Iodine Deficiency, systematic review of meta-analysis, the adjustment for the accounting for bias was quite good. They scored bias on randomization procedures, blinding of participants and investigators, and withdrawal from studies. And the quality of non-randomized trials were assessed using the Newcastle-Ottawa scale. One study used a semi-qualitative food frequency questionnaire, which is subject to recall bias, which was not properly adjusted for. Then lastly, in effective iodine supplementation in pregnancy on child development and other clinical outcomes, a systematic literature review of randomized control trials, we find their risk of bias assessment to be quite thorough. They cover random sequence generation, allocation concealment, blinding of participants and personnel, blinding of outcome measurements, incomplete outcome data, and selective reporting, many of which were found to be of high risk and almost the same amount found to be low risk, but were still included with their inclusion criteria in this study. We find that the risk of bias assessment was found to be unclear in one aspect in all the studies that were produced, which just demonstrates again that the level of data or quality of evidence in the data provided wasn't sufficient to satisfy the high level of evidence that the researchers were looking for. Now looking at the reported outcomes the studies included. Once again in the study, we found that no cause and effect relationship was found between iodine supplementation and developmental outcomes in children. There was found, however, a reduction in the incidence of cretinism in interventions with iodine in regions of severe iodine deficiency. In these groups, iodine compared to placebo groups raised IQ and lowered the psychological age retardation. Studies of mild to moderate iodine deficiency, none of the 6 trials that were included actually reported on outcomes related to the growth and development of children, once again demonstrating that the lack of appropriate data found by the researchers. This next study was found that iodine supplementation improves some maternal thyroid indices, even in marginally iodine deficient areas. These included maternal UAE, which was significantly increased with iodine treatment between 43 and 170%, thyroid-stimulating hormone, which normal ranges rise during pregnancy. This was not found in iodine treatment groups versus the controls, or there was no change found in either group. Higher thyroid-stimulating hormone levels were found in supplementation in early pregnancy group versus those that had received iodized salt for 2 years. So iodized salt was found to be more efficient. Then there was found to be a rise in untreated groups and a decrease in treated groups in maternal thyroglobin. And then with T4, free T4, either no change or a decrease in treated groups and control groups. And no effect was found there, although higher free levels of T4 were found in groups that received 2 years of iodized salt before pregnancy versus the prophylactic supplementation in pregnancy. And then in terms of neonatal function, higher thyroglobin levels were found, or larger thyroid volumes were found with maternal supplementation. Then in the next study, the reviewers commented that their findings are limited by a small number of quality control trials, especially in relation to maternal iodization and newborn cognitive function. Most of their research was around children. As we can see here, they have a unique way of displaying their outcome measurements, talking with their grading system. And as you can see, most of the studies that they found were non-conclusive. Starting with the children's studies were the ones that they actually found probable. In their probable grading system, iodine supplementation improves iodine status in mildly, moderate, and severe iodine deficient children. Ages 7 to 13 was found to be probable using 4B studies. And iodine supplementation or improved iodine status improves cognitive function in moderately to severe iodine deficient children ages 6 to 13. Was also found probable. These are the studies that they actually managed to produce a meta-analysis with. And then with the developmental stages and pregnancy, two outcome measurements that studies were found to be actually suggestive. The outcome measurement was iodine supplementation during pregnancy is related to improved maternal iodine status and or thyroid function. And improved prenatal iodine status is associated with improved cognitive function of infants and children up to 18 months. That was probably the only really relevant piece of data that came out of this review. And then finally, let's talk about the lessons learned from the evidence so far. Overall, a lack of quality evidence of the effect of prenatal and periconceptional iodine supplementation on the growth and cognitive function of children was found. Yet some studies suggested that mild to moderate iodine deficiency in pregnant women is associated with impaired cognitive function of children. Studies showed that lower maternal thyroxine and or higher maternal TSH in pregnancy were associated with lower IQ in children. Also, an interesting point is that the WHO and UNICEF and the ICCIDD increased reference ranges for pregnant women from 200 to 250 micrograms per day. Yet supplementation of 200 to 300 micrograms per day had equal effect to that of salt iodization for 2 years. Then in terms of that, an ongoing study in Australia on pregnancy, iodine, and neurodevelopment in kids, the PINK study, is researching the effect of 150 micrograms per day of iodine versus placebo in women in the 20th week of pregnancy. And evidence suggests that iodine supplementation in countries with mild to moderate iodine deficiency is beneficial, yet data remains lacking for maternal iodine supplementation and offspring development. And that appears to be the general consensus of all reviewers. Here are the studies of which we included in this review, and thank you very much for watching.